People keep asking about this, so I'm just going to make a quick video on it. The reason for all of the layoffs is a Trump era policy that changed the tax code in America. You can go look up Section 174, and that's pretty easy to do. Let's see here. Let's make sure you can actually see this. Okay. As you can see, I've gone through this a few bits, on my own research. But the thing is that it's actually Section 174 that has done this. And if you actually look at the timeline, all these big tech companies are using this law as an excuse to fire as many people as they can in order to rein in some short-term profits by allowing themselves to have more revenue from how it works. And so the end result is that Trump passed this law not because it was good for America or good for business, but because he was getting dunked on Twitter. Okay? He explicitly said this before his account got banned. And so the reason that Section 174 and the rule changes that make it so that companies can't be considered research and development houses anymore is because of this. Okay. All software got redefined as a form of research that has to be capitalized over 5 years. It is not something that can be directly written off anymore. This has dramatically changed things because before what would happen is if you look at the, uh, let's see, it was, wow, that's a lot of stupid stuff. And let's see, what do I want to look for here? The so section 174, obviously, let's just look at the actual uh Cornell thing that I've gone through in the past. As you can see, this is the actual law, and the important thing here is section 3. Okay, for the purposes of let's see, let's just make this bigger for all of you. Okay. For the purposes of section, any amount paid or incurred in connection with the development of any software shall be treated as a research and experimental expenditure. What that does is it says anything related to software, whether it's employing software development engineers or actively doing any kind of software development work for something that is already out on prod or not, doesn't matter. It's considered research. And what that means is that specified research experimental expenditure means that they have to. They cannot write it off. They cannot say, "Look, we spent $100,000 employing somebody, and they wrote software for us, and then the startup failed, so we needed to pivot into the next year." And they can't say, "Oh, well, we spent 100,000, we made 100,000. That is that doesn't work anymore." They can't say that they didn't make any money because they didn't in that case. If you subtract the net from the gross and all that fun stuff, you get zero. But the tax code says no. Look, you have to spend extra taxes on that. And so when you go through all of this, what it ultimately amounts to is it's possible for a company to make $1 million on software development, spend $1 million on software development, and then get hit with an extra tax bill that is actually more than they made. And that's just unsustainable. The fact is, if you are making $1 million and spending $1 million, you are making zero money. You are making zero profit in that year. But because of this tax change, you now have a tax burden of $135,000 on top of the fact that you are at zero money, which means in this particular case, you've basically lost $135,000 minimum. And so the reason that all these companies are going out of their way to fire people is because they're getting tax bills and they're trying to keep their numbers up as much as possible. Because if they don't, they're going to have tax bills and they're going to have extra expenses. And a lot of these companies are publicly traded, which means it hurts them in the long run in ways that are not necessarily for the current year. And so the end result of all this is that if you look at the actual thing, you actually got Theo here. Theo Rance did a great video on this. You should probably go check that out, because this is something that I actually have made videos on, and I've removed them because I got a little too, let's just say, emotional. And the problem here is that there has been a lot of people that have talked about this, and I don't think it's getting enough attention in the community. I've got a lot of people who seem to think that the numbers that they learned about 5 years ago for tech, and they come to me and they talk about how they're going to make millions of dollars as a software development engineer, and how they're going to get, $200,000 a year in their first year as a junior, and that world doesn't exist anymore. Okay? These issues are honestly the biggest issue with, this issue is the biggest issue in regards to killing tech. It actively killed American technology independence, and it's making a lot of our people move overseas. I'm actually watching as companies in the UK and so forth are trying to hire and relocate some people I know because of this issue. And so the end result is that this is killing innovation, and it's absolutely killing the tech industry, because a lot of people will say, no, it's interest rates. And that's actually part of it, but it's not all of it. Here's how it used to work before: interest rates would allow companies to borrow tons of money. They would spend that money at very cheap interest rates on software development. They would then, if those investments didn't work out, they would actually just write it off on their taxes for the same year. And at that point, they would have their accountants do their due diligence, and they would then pay back the money that they borrowed. And it would be a very cheap, easy way for them to invest in technology and innovation and allow them to create new products and services. Because when it actually worked and they started making money, they could take that money and feed it back to pay off their debt payments and pay off that debt, and then they would have a thriving business they could either sell or have in the market or whatever. And so the fact that they can't do that anymore means that these companies now have to think about the next 5 years as from the day they start, and they're not allowed to say, "Oh, well, we built this product over the last 6 months and it didn't really work. So let's just make that write off and spend the rest of the year working on this other thing that we know will probably make money, but it's not as exciting and it's not as innovative. So let's just do that." They can't do that anymore. Okay. They're not allowed to say, "Oh, well, we want to innovate. Let's take that risk," because the risk is too excessive now because of the higher interest rates, which means that they're not be able to borrow money at such a low interest rate anymore. And because of this tax change, they're not able to write it off for that year anymore. And so it's not just interest rates. Interest rates by itself is not the problem. In fact, a lot of people I've talked to have said that the interest rates are not a problem because they have access to hard money loans and other things that would allow them to still do this. The big problem is their inability to write it off on their taxes. If they hire a team of 5 developers, things don't work out. And at that point, they have to pivot. And so the end result of all this is that there are two things that are killing tech right now, but the biggest one is Section 174, because even if interest rates go down, Section 174 is still going to stop people from being able to innovate. And it's still going to stop people from being able to actually say, "Oh, look, we made $1 million on this membership thing that we built, but we also had to spend $1 million to develop it. We didn't make any money. Oh, well, at least we don't have a tax burden." That world doesn't exist anymore. And so, as a result of that, there's no incentive for companies to pay the high wages and other issues that people are so in love with tech for. The reason so many people want to get into tech isn't because they actually like tech. It's not because they grew up writing code on a Commodore or anything like that. It's not like they grew up in junior high school writing hypercard scripts and hypercard stacks, writing Apple scripts like I did. It's because they think it, they go, well, let's look at all the jobs I could possibly do. You know what? Tech pays money. Let's go there, and that's why. And that world doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. If you're somebody who doesn't have those skills, then you're not going to make that money. And the companies know that, because what's going to happen is if you come in and you are a total noob and you have no skills at all, maybe you went to school, maybe you didn't, doesn't matter. If you have no professional experience, you are not qualified for the bulk of these roles. Why? Because in the tech industry, the people who actually have the skills are the people that are in the tech industry already. Because the tech skills that people need to stay in tech are not taught in schools. And people think, oh, I'll just take a boot camp. No, it doesn't work like that. Because unfortunately, no 6 week, 8 week program will teach you the skills that you need to be in tech. These are skills that you iterate on over many years of a career in tech. And they are not something that you can learn in a 6 week, 8 week course that they force you to go into debt for while not giving you anything of actual value. And so the end result is that if you apply to a job and you say that you come from a boot camp, you are a higher risk to the company, because not only are you calling out the fact that you're very ignorant, but you're also calling out the fact that you probably haven't shipped anything. And so as a result of that, when I am hiring and I have a giant stack of resumes on my desk, I filter out the people who have gone to boot camps. If they have no other resources, projects, etc., I just throw them in the trash. And you should understand that this is done to protect the company. And it was something that I learned from an HR professional, because they do that anyway. If you don't have prior experience at Amazon, Google, the big tech companies, and you're coming from a tech boot camp, you are worthless. You have no skills, and if you haven't shipped anything of value, it's even worse. And so you can get around that by using your tech skills that you think you have to ship something big and have it make money. But at that point, if you're making money on that, then why do you need the job anyway? You don't, because at that point you're making money on your own projects, right? So the big issue here is that there are there's a false dichotomy around the idea that tech pays money for new people, because it doesn't exist anymore. It might have at one point, but I don't believe that that world exists anymore with this tax change. Because what's going to happen is you've effectively split the market into two sides. You have the older, more experienced people who have been a part of the technology world for a long time and have iterated through the processes and the software development lifecycle and have actually shipped product to production multiple times. And because of that, they've learned the skills and abilities that companies actually want and need. And then you have the people that are coming out of school with no actual experience, who may or may not have gone to a boot camp, may or may not have a degree, doesn't matter, because if they don't have real world practical professional experience, they don't have the skills they need to actually be valuable to a company. And so that is one of the reasons why the ramp up for juniors is so long. It takes years for them to ramp up. And it's weird because a lot of juniors will say, well, no, I'm smart, I can do it quickly. No, you can't. I've seen so many juniors fall flat on their face because they don't know what they're doing. They take on too much responsibility, they take on too much scope, and then they fail so epically that they have to get fired, because either that or their boss that believed in them has to be fired. And the boss isn't going to do that. So you're gone. Sorry. And so the end result is that I am looking at this, and I'm looking at the interest rate changes, and I'm looking at the tax code changes, and I'm looking at all of this from the perspective of both a software development engineer who is principal engineer in level, who's been a level 7 at Amazon, who's been a level 64 at at Microsoft Research, and has been at other companies. And I shipped the mobile order and pay system at Starbucks. I did a bunch of other stuff. I was on some great teams. It wasn't just me, just to be clear. I worked with some good people. And I also work with some bad people, but oh well, it's how it is. And the end result is that I'm looking at this from the perspective of somebody who is now looking at more at the business side of things. And I'm looking at this and going, this is unsustainable. This is killing technology in America. Because if every year a company has, 20 to 30% more tax burden, and they have to save 30 cents for every dollar they make to make it so that they can actually afford the new tax burden, then the prices have to go up, for one. The age of cheap tech is over. There's no way for them to be able to keep subsidizing this anymore because it was subsidized by cheap interest rates and the ability to write it off on their taxes. But that's gone now, which means a lot of these companies, especially like DoorDash and so forth, their prices are going up and you can actually see that. And that's happening because of changes like this that do not allow them to say, look, we'll just take the loss on our taxes and then we'll write it off. They can't do that anymore. And so, because of that, these changes have absolutely killed tech. And they've created I'm not going to say brave new world, but I will, because there's too many connotations with that. But what I will say is that every single attempt to fix this has failed. Okay. The House passed a couple ways of trying to fix this. But because of the fact that this was a Trump era policy, the GOP will not allow it to go through. And I'm not going to get into the politics of that. But what I will say is that every attempt to fix this issue has failed. Because if it gets overturned or if it gets fixed, then somebody's going to get egg on their face politically. And because of that, we have the world as it is now, and there is no way to fix it because people in power would have to admit that they made a mistake. And so, as a result of that, if you are looking to get in technology because you have it somehow in your head that there is lots of opportunity for you, or that you're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or whatever, stop. That's not the world anymore. Things have changed. There was a patch update. Game mechanics changed. And you have to think about how the world looks now, not how you want it to be. And that is why, if you are working in tech right now, my recommendation is to start your own company. Start your own company, have a side hustle, do whatever. But my recommendation is that it not be related to AI and that you actually go out of your way to try to build something that actually does make the world better. It actually does drive down prices. That actually does take away people's pain. Because that is the only way you're going to be successful. If you really want to spend those years of research and time learning to code and learning to code effectively using the right patterns and everything else, that is how I would do it. But if you are actually looking to get into technology simply because you think you'll make yourself a lot of money, go into the trades instead. Become an electrician or a plumber. It's less work, it's cheaper in terms of cost of education, and there's a huge demand for it. Go into the trades. And if you look down on the trades, or you're the sort of person who says, I don't want to be a garbage man, remember the teachers telling you not to be like the garbage man are making about half as much money as the garbage man does. Okay? Be a sanitation engineer. There are many sanitation engineers who make more than junior software development engineers. Think about that. And so the world has changed, and you have to be flexible and change with it. So, to recap, Section 174 has changed. Interest rates have changed. Okay, there are tons of different interest rates, but as you can see, they're all pretty high. They're about twice as high as they were when I bought my house. And so the fun thing about this is that even if they go down, you're still not going to be able to write all that stuff off on your taxes. You're not going to be able to say, look, I spent $500,000 employing 3 engineers, and I only made that much. So I didn't make any money. I made zero profit. So I don't have to worry about taxes, right? No, that's not how the world is. You're going to get hit with a tax burden of around $100,000 anyway, and then it's going to be debt for you because you are going to be told by the IRS. Remember, let's see here, new tab. Let's see here. Let's see, remember, the IRS means theirs. Got it? The IRS, theirs. So that's how it works. And you should understand that between the Section 174 changes, the interest rate changes, not only is it more expensive to borrow money, but you can't write it off on your taxes, which in turn makes it that much harder to pay back. And so all that investment that happened in technology doesn't exist anymore. And a lot of that investment was in wages for engineers because they were trying to promote the idea that if you innovated, you could share in that in some way by innovating enough to where you could earn a high salary on working on that project. That is a different world. Okay. The companies that can afford to do that are already profitable, and what it's done is it's kind of killed the technology world in that the amount of companies that can afford the best talent has been restricted and actively gone out of their way to just be smaller. Because if I want to go in and start a tech company, which I would love to, the fact is I can't afford to. Because if I have a software development engineer as my primary operating cost, because remember, the cost of employing people is your primary operating cost in most businesses. The fact is, at that point, I'm not going to be able to say, "Oh, look, this is something that I didn't make money on, so I can't write it off on my taxes anymore." I have to amortize that over 5 years if they're based in America. And this is what I mean about the offshore stuff too, because if it's offshore, I can't do it over 5 years. If you look at section 174, 15-year, capitalizing my research over 5 to 15 years in tax years. Okay. And so the idea there is that if you are actively going through, and if it's 15 years because of the offshore stuff, the idea there is that the government doesn't want you to offshore. They want all those technology people onshore in the country because it's better for American sovereignty and American military power and everything involved in that, for the company to be independent and not depend on the brain power of people in other countries. Okay? And so the idea there is that if you are actively going out of your way to hire people in other countries as an American citizen, then you have the tax burden of dealing with amortization over 15 years instead of 5. So not only have they made it so you can't write everything off in the first year, you have to do it over 5 years. But if you're stupid enough to be hiring people offshore for your work, you can't take that tax burden with you over the next 5 years. You have to do it over the next 15, which means that you have a cost associated with employing them over the next 15 years, even if they only work for you for half of a year. Think about that. It is now so many times more expensive to hire offshore for software than it is onshore. And this is one of the saving graces. If you're still in software, you should be able to, if you're an American citizen and you have a green card, obviously 15 years, 5 years, green card is just better in terms of, sorry, green card is better than offshore. But American citizenship is better than all of those from a tax and business liability perspective. And so, if you're an American citizen who was born in America, you are still in the best place from a tax and accounting perspective for a company. You are less risk. And so, as a result of that, the yeah. So, if you are, but the big issue is that they still want Americans to have access to the American tech industry. It's just smaller now. And so, because companies can't say, oh, look, we're going to start up a company, invest the funds that we've borrowed into it, and then write that off on our taxes anymore, there are a lot less startups and there's going to be a lot less innovation. Now, what that does is it also creates more of a Red Sea business perspective for a lot of the people that are left, because you're going to have people with larger moats who are not going to be able to actively go around and uh, do startups and things. But in some cases, that also means you're going to have more of a blue sea uh, option there, in that there's going to be less people, but they're all going to know each other. And so I'm kind of curious how that's going to pan out. I've been told, both sides of this. I don't know how it will work. But what I do know is that we really need to repeal Section 174. And this, it was passed by the House of Representatives. But unfortunately, once it passed the House, it went into the Senate, and then it died there because of the issues I've already talked about. And so this is a perfect example. You're totaling 1 million, it's a 90% reduction. So you still have to pay all those taxes. This is how it is. Alexa, what's 35% of a million? 35% of 1 million is 350,000. Yeah. Alexa, what's 90% of 350,000? 90% of 350,000 is 315,000. So there you go. I didn't even have to do the math for you. It just comes down to you save 40 or so $1,000, and that's it now. But you're not actually saving the money that you used to, and so it's a lot more expensive. And this is the reason that it definitely caused layoffs. It's months by months in January through January 4th. It's causing layoffs. The reason that the tech industry is experiencing so many layoffs, and the reason that it's happening every, you know, 3 to 4 months, is because that's in line with the tax season for companies, because they have to file their taxes every 3 months, not just yearly, every 3 months. So if you go back and you look at all the layoffs that have happened and you align them up to the quarterly need to file taxes, and make sure there's a small delay, of course, because people are going to be like, oh, WTF, we need to do this, and then they go have to do that. But it aligns well, and that is why. And so, again, if you are not in technology, don't enter technology. If you have the option of going to school for technology, don't. Go be a plumber, go be an electrician. And if you are already in the first year of technology school and you are, learning about computer science and so forth, switch your major. I mean it. Switch your major. And it sucks. I know that. I t- I really wish that this wasn't something that I was saying, but looking at this and the fact that I do not believe it will get fixed within the next 15 years, because of how contentious the American political parties are right now and everything that's going on. Based on the current trends for politics in America, I don't believe it will get fixed for the next 15 years or so. And so my recommendation is that people who have the opportunity to not be in tech should take the other options available to them. And if, as you can see, cause layoffs. Yeah. So this is a whole bunch of fun stuff here. It's 5 years, 5 years for domestic expenditures, or 15 years for SRE expenditures due to foreign research. AKA, if you're hiring devs in India or something, that's the 15-year rule. And so a lot of companies are getting rid of their India-based developers because of this. And what's going to happen is those companies are going to need to hire Americans in order to get around the tax burden. And unfortunately, but you can't actually go in here and say, oh, well, I choose this to be one and not the other. That's not how this works. All software is considered Section 174 now, and it sucks. And as I said in the past, I've made videos on this that I've then deleted because I got really emotional about this, and it's it's something that I really do feel is killing American tech dominance, and I can't help but feel like the people who worked on that bill actively sabotaged America. And so, if tell your friends about it, talk to your accountants about it. You have friends that are accountants or work in finance, get their thoughts on this. And if they're not aware of it, then that's an issue because they should be aware of it. It is such a controversial thing, but unfortunately, you've got it is such a bad thing because tech innovation was funded by easy money, low interest rates, the ability to invest that money into things that, maybe they didn't always pan out, but when they did, they made enough money to keep the cycle going. And it allowed innovation to happen. And it's actually one of the things that created the expansion of technology in America and tech dominance. Uh, our apps, our infrastructure, everything. It was perpetuated by that. And so I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the fallout not just be tech startups. I'm seeing electrical engineering being hurt by this. I'm seeing military independence of America being hurt by this. I'm seeing this as a national security issue. And if you don't think that's the case, then I would say that you don't understand the problem. But this has been a very long video so far, so I'm just going to end it there. Uh, I think this is I think this is the best version of the video that I've made, even though I've made some much more succinct versions of this video in the past. And it just needed to be said, and it needs to be something that I can keep on my channel and not have something that I have to delete because I feel like I was emotionally too vulnerable. So here you go.